Well, it is Flame Tech Football Friday. Talking a lot of 3 and 4 down football today. And 3DownNation.com CFL insider Justin Dunk joins us today. The Adam Schefter of Canada. And we're hoping to get a lot out of him in CFL news today. Happy New Year, Justin. How are you, my friend?
Happy 2020, buddy. Doing well. What about you, Roddy?
Well, we're great here. We're cooking with gas, man. We got some big announcements to come here in 2021 with the program, and we're excited about it. But for the CFL, I don't know if you've caught much of what we've been talking about today, but it certainly is looking positive that there's going to be a season. You've seen the plethora of announcements, the contract restructurings. How do you feel about the fact that they're going to get onto the field here with or without fans in 2021?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of insider information. So as everyone well knows, the federal government gave the NHL the go-ahead and waived the 14-day quarantine rule for players to come in, get to training camp, and now the teams in every province have been okayed to play in their home arenas. Well, I wouldn't ask the public agency of health if the CFL had gone down that road and potentially seeing about waiving that quarantine period. And that conversation, from their perspective, hasn't happened yet. Now, the CFL is ways away from their season, scheduled to potentially kick off in June, the regular season that is. But those conversations, at least at this point, haven't been held, Roddy, because I thought, well, the blueprint's there with the NHL. The CFL can follow it and point to it as a precedent, although there is still some time here for the CFL to have those conversations with the various levels of government.
Well, you got some free pub on TSN 1290 Winnipeg this morning because Westwood brought up 3Down Scoop on the contract stalemates, if you will, between the Argos and their quarterback, Matt Nichols, and the Red Blacks and their quarterback, Nick Arbuckle. What can you tell us about what 3Down's reporting there?
Those are two very interesting situations. And to add context to it, Rod, you got to look at all the other teams, right? You have Mike Riley signing an extension in BC, restructuring his deal. Levi Mitchell does the same with the Calgary Stampeders. Trevor Harris, the same with Edmonton. Vernon Adams Jr. did that with the Montreal Alouettes. And from what I'm told, Zach Collaros and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers working towards a conclusion there, as well as the teams spend closer to the salary cap floor than the ceiling. So the two outliers here currently are the Argos and the Red Blacks. The Ticats in a little bit of a different situation. They have Dane Evans under contract. Jeremiah Masoli's a pending free agent, but there's a long-standing relationship there between Masoli and the franchise. So you would imagine something would get done, especially with the Ticats set to host the Grey Cup in November. So we go to the Red Blacks and the Argos, two teams that had quarterbacks where you might have thought before the contracts were signed would be in opposite places. Nick Arbuckle and his relationship with Ryan Dinwiddie, the head coach now in Toronto, and Matt Nichols following Paul LaPolice to Ottawa. That didn't happen. It was in reverse. But the Argos specifically are taking a hardline stance. Their goal is to get to the regular season without having given out so much as a penny in guaranteed money to any players, because they don't want to be in a situation where if the season gets, let's say, shrunk down to maybe just 9 games or whatever we end up playing, if it's not a full season, they don't want to give out that guaranteed money that you're essentially allotting for a full 18-game schedule. From the Red Blacks standpoint, from what I've heard, General Manager Marcel Desjardins wants to take a chunk of money off of Nick Arbuckle's contract, sort of similar to what the other big-name quarterbacks have done. I've heard it's in the $100,000 range, so there's going to be some negotiating, and there's almost a sense, I believe, with those two franchises that they can rebuild. They have a little bit of time in terms of the future. They're not going to be rushed, especially the Argos. So they'll see whatever quarterback's left on the market, they'll get a bargain deal.
Thank you for the explanation. Now, you've broken some big stories in the last 24 hours. Edmonton signing Derek Dennis, signing wideout Darrell Walker, coveted free agent, and that will show the door to Greg Ellingson. Can you talk about some pretty big moves in the Alberta capital here in the last day?
That's right. The Edmonton Football Club, even though they don't have a name yet, still making some big time moves. As you mentioned, Dennison Walker. And what that does now is make Greg Ellingson, in my mind, the top playmaker available. We're talking about a guy, Roddy, who has 5 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons. And he didn't even have Trevor Harris for 5 games last year. It was Logan Kilgore throwing him the rock there for a little while with Edmonton. So the fact that Edmonton chose to sign Darrell Walker means that there's just not going to be enough money there to sign Ellingson unless he would come way down on his price point. But, I mean, at that point in his career, he's in his prime. He's a guy that deserves that upper echelon money, even in a new marketplace because of COVID-19 that, from what I'm hearing, Ellingson could potentially be available via trade, or it's highly likely that he'll hit the free agent market.
For sure. And he was in my top 10 list of free agents. Big Greg Ellingson fan here. I mean, he's very hard to cover. You mentioned the numbers, and I agree with you. I think he is still in the prime of his career. He's got a lot more 1,000-yard seasons ahead of him. However, he did hint on this show and on his social media that he might be looking at the XFL. And I think at some point he will play in the XFL. Do you think the CFL is in his immediate future?
Well, I'm sure he's going to look hard at it, and it's the league he's had the most success in, and he knows this game so well and has been productive in multiple offenses. So from my understanding, it's going to be CFL first, and that's the focus right now. Unless the money comes way down, then maybe he looks at the XFL, but we're talking about a guy in Ellingson that's used to making, $200,000+. If they played in 2020, he was on the books for $210,000.
Wow.
So that's a guy that is used to making that elite, let's say, money in the CFL for a receiver.
Well, and that's a good segue into this point. A lot of the elite paid guys in the CFL are being asked to restructure their deals, not just quarterbacks, obviously. And with the CFL, they're kind of picking and choosing which news they want to announce. It really just the good news, which they're not the only league in the world that wants to do that. I certainly understand it, but that's not to say there isn't the other type of news going on. Let's be honest. I'm talking to the players. You're talking to the players. We're talking to agents. Like just about everybody that's making big money is being asked to take less, right?
Exactly. And when you looked at the salary cap, that the difference between the top end of it in the current collective bargaining agreement and the bottom end of it, the $4.75 million, I should say, was about 10%. So you had an idea that that was going to be the reduction across the board. The quarterbacks, especially the ones with American residences, have kind of gotten by. Let's say, for example, Cody Fajardo turns a roster bonus into a signing bonus and on paper takes less, so it helps the riders, but he comes out equal. Although that's not going to be the same case for some of these upper echelon guys. And as you said, in terms of the good news, we've heard all of the re-signings and the quarterbacks restructuring and the stars that have gone back to their teams. Brandon Banks would be top among them. But what we haven't heard is what's going to be the fallout from that. I'll give you one big name, a guy that's used to play there in Riderville, Enoch Mwamba. We haven't heard much there. The Alouettes have made a number of moves and continue to build that roster. And Mwamba's a big-time piece who, in the past, has made well over $200,000 that the Alouettes have yet to lock up. So I wonder if a guy like Enoch Mwamba is going to be another big name that potentially hits the market.
I think I had Enoch as my number 2 available free agent. Frenzy's got one for you.
Justin, I just got to ask you the big question. What do you think the chances are of the CFL playing this year and playing a normal schedule, starting on June 10th, as they say, or even going to starting in Labor Day and winding up in almost Christmas? But I've heard they're going to play no matter what. Their guys are going all out for it. They're talking to major companies to try to get some financing. I think they must have some of that because they're all making announcements. I feel confident about this league this year. How do you feel?
Frenzy coming with the high heat, my man. I like it right off the bat. I feel good, and I'll preface that by saying because of the amount of guaranteed money and signing bonuses that is being given out here. For example, Mike Riley gets $375,000 in a signing bonus, along with $250,000 of the guaranteed money that he was owed. So Mike Riley's going to get $675,000 before he even plays it down in 2020. If the Lions are willing to invest that money, they must be very confident that there's going to be a season. And you can see it in a number of other places. So to me, that shows that the CFL is legitimately working towards playing as many games as possible. But until we actually get up to that point closer to the regular season and seeing how the vaccines have been distributed across the country and how many have got to people and where the government stands in terms of letting fans in, then we're not going to know. There's been people that I've spoken to that have said, well, you could play the first 9 games without fans, and then hopefully by Labor Day, when it seems to be about the timeline where everyone in Canada might have access to a vaccine if they want it, then they could allow fans in from Labor Day on. But the timeline, as we all know with COVID-19, is ever changing. Although I am getting more confident by the day with all the money being handed out that there's going to be some kind of CFL football in 2021.
Glad to hear that.
Glad to hear it. Thank you. And lastly, this is the way it's supposed to work. Gia is watching on YouTube. As you know, this week we've debuted on YouTube Live. Obviously a Ticats fan. Yeah, Ticats season ticket holder. Asks, will Jeremiah Masoli be back with the Tiger Cats? I think he's your number 1 free agent at 3Down, is he not? Is he going back to Steeltown, JD?
Masoli is our number 1 guy at 3Down, and it's because he's really the only legitimate, proven franchise quarterback that could potentially, and I should say that, potentially hit the market. The Ticats have had negotiations with Jeremiah Masoli and his representation, and Speedy Banks, part of the reason that he wanted to re-sign so quickly and at a reduced rate, approximately $160,000, and he's a guy that's used to making closer to $200,000, is because he wanted to show his teammates that, hey, if the MOP's back, I want to get Simone Lawrence back, and I want to get our quarterback back in Jeremiah Masoli. Speedy Banks and Jeremiah Masoli are very tight, so I would imagine there's been conversations between both of those guys, and that Masoli has such a long-standing relationship with the franchise and with the Grey Cup being there. The Ticats know that you at least have to have a couple quarterbacks to get through the season. So I would imagine, and if I was a betting man, and sometimes I am at Bodog Canada, that Masoli and the Ticats find a way to get a deal done.
Have you placed the odds on that at bodog.ca? The odds on Jeremiah Masoli coming back?
No, we got to get the lines up, though, man. That reminds me. I'll get on them.
150 plus. Justin, this has just been an outstanding CFL update. Thank you, sir. Clearly, you see how closely I'm following 3DownNation.com. Keep up the great work and have a great weekend.
Appreciate you, man, and congrats on launching on YouTube and Twitter. We'll be retweeting and help get the show out there as much as we can, Roddy. Love you, buddy.
Thank you, buddy.
Great
Appreciate it.
here.
Justin Dunk from 3DownNation.com.
You're watching Rod Peterson on demand. For more of The Rod Peterson Show, visit rodpeterson.com or follow Rod Peterson on social media.